London, 1887. You think you know how to behave. You have read the books. You have seen the paintings, the women in enormous skirts, the men with the top hats, the tea, the gloves, the rigid posture. You think the rules were about manners. They were not about manners. They were about survival. And in 24 hours inside that world, you would break approximately 40 of them before noon. Not because you are rude, because you have never been trained to see the invisible architecture that held Victorian high society together, and the invisible trapdoors that opened beneath anyone who stepped wrong. Let's find out exactly where you would fall. It begins before you open your eyes. 6:45 in the morning. A knock on your bedroom door. Not a loud knock. A specific knock. 2 taps, a pause, 1 tap. You do not answer with your voice. You do not say, "Come in." You say nothing at all. The maid enters regardless. She has already read your silence correctly. She places the hot water on the washstand, opens the curtains exactly halfway, and leaves without making eye contact. You have communicated with another human being using no words and no gesture. And if you had said, "Come in," like a normal person, she would have stopped in the doorway, uncertain, because the protocol had been broken and she would not know which version of the morning she was now in. This is the first 40 seconds of the day. The water on the washstand is not for bathing. It is for washing your hands and face before the maid returns to help you dress. The bath, if there is one, happened the night before, or happens on a Thursday depending on the household. Most households with a full domestic staff bathed their employers 2 or 3 times per week. The water was carried up by hand. A full bath in a house without running water, which was most houses outside the very wealthiest districts, required 11 separate trips from the kitchen. 11 trips per bath. You understand why Thursday was selected. Now you are standing in your dressing room and you cannot dress yourself. This is not metaphor. You literally cannot dress yourself. The clothes of Victorian high society were engineered to require assistance. A woman's corset laced from the back. Her sleeves buttoned at the wrist with 16 buttons that no human hand could reach from the front. Her skirt attached at points her arms could not find without a mirror and a maid simultaneously. A man's white tie required a valet because the knot, once learned, could be executed in under a minute by someone who had done it 3,000 times, and in approximately never by someone who had not. You are not helpless. The clothes are helpless without the system. By 7:30, you are dressed. You will not see your bedroom again until 10 o'clock at night. In the interim, approximately 9 hours of public performance begin, and the first performance happens at breakfast. Breakfast in a Victorian upper-class household was not a meal. It was a declaration of household status conducted in food form. On a sideboard, not on the table, on a sideboard, there would be between 6 and 14 dishes kept warm over spirit lamps. Kedgeree, deviled kidneys, cold game from the night before, eggs in 3 preparations, bacon, kippers, toast in a silver rack, potted meats, preserves in cut glass jars. You served yourself from the sideboard. This was one of the only moments in a formal Victorian day where you served yourself anything. The footman stood nearby not to serve the food, but to manage the teapot and the coffee, and to replace dishes as they emptied. You would look at this sideboard and feel that it was excessive. That feeling would be correct. That feeling would also be the point. The excess was not waste. The excess was information. A household that could staff a sideboard with 14 dishes at 7:30 in the morning was communicating its position in a language that every guest could read instantly. Reduce the sideboard, and you reduce the signal. Reduce the signal, and you become, in the vocabulary of Victorian social calculus, a house in decline. Now sit down. You have chosen the wrong chair. There is a right chair for breakfast, and it is not the one at the head of the table. The head of the table is the host's chair, and it is not your chair. But beyond that, the specific chair you select communicates your understanding of your own position in the room. If you are a guest staying in the house, you do not sit until the family sits. If you are family, you do not sit until the head of household enters or sends word that breakfast is informal this morning, which is a specific phrase meaning the host will not be attending, and the meal may proceed without ceremony. You sat down. without waiting. The footman noticed. He will not say anything. He will never say anything. But the information has entered a system that has no delete function. By 9 o'clock, you have finished breakfast and the day separates by gender so completely that you might as well be in two different houses. If you are a man, you have approximately 2 hours before the morning calls begin. You might read the paper, the Times, which costs 3p, and which a man of your position reads in full, including the shipping intelligence, because shipping intelligence is money, and money is why any of this exists. You might attend a correspondence. Letters in Victorian high society were not casual. A letter was a document. It was written on specific paper with a specific pen. The handwriting of a gentleman was itself a social credential. Bad handwriting suggested poor education, which suggested a man who had not been sent to the right school, which suggested a family that could not afford the right school, which suggested everything. Handwriting masters charged by the term. Many families paid. If you are a woman, the 9 o'clock hour is when the household actually begins to function, because you are the household. The cook arrives for the daily conference. You discuss the menus, lunch, dinner, and any calls expected this afternoon that require refreshment. You inspect the flowers, because flowers in the reception rooms communicate the vitality of the house in the same language as the sideboard. You review the linen inventory, because linen that has gone gray instead of white is the kind of detail that a visitor notices without knowing she noticed it, and reports without knowing she reported it. The information travels through a network of morning calls and afternoon teas at a speed that would surprise you. By 11 o'clock, the calls begin. Morning calls were not made in the morning. They were made between 11 and 1. No one questioned this. The name had been set, and the name stayed. You dress again for calls. Not a full change, a modification. The morning dress becomes the visiting dress. The hat changes, the gloves change. The gloves are not optional. Bare hands on a morning call were not casual. Bare hands on a morning call meant something had gone wrong. Illness, grief, poverty, or foreignness. Any of these explanations was possible. None of them was good. You arrive at a house and you hand your card to the footman. Your card. If you do not have a card, you do not make morning calls. You do not exist in this social geography. A calling card was approximately 3 inches by 2 inches. The man's card was slightly larger than the woman's. A married woman's card carried her husband's name with Mrs. preceding it. Her name, her actual given name, did not appear. She was Mrs. Charles Whitmore or Mrs. Frederick Ashton. She was the social extension of a man who might be in Birmingham for the week and had nothing to do with the call currently being made. The card was handed to the footman, who placed it on a silver tray, which he carried to the lady of the house, who decided, in the next 45 seconds, whether she was at home or not at home. She might be sitting 12 feet away. Not at home did not mean absent. Not at home meant not receiving. And receiving or not receiving was entirely at the discretion of the lady, for reasons she was never required to explain. You could be standing in the entrance hall while she was in the drawing room directly above you, and she was not at home. And you thanked the footman, retrieved one of your cards, turned down the upper right corner to indicate you had called in person rather than sent the card by post, and left. You do not feel insulted. Feeling insulted would mean you had misunderstood the system. The system was not personal. The system was a filter. Not at home was the mechanism by which a woman managed 400 social relationships simultaneously without ever having to say no to anyone's face. It was not rejection. It was administration. Now you are at home. You have been received. You are sitting in the drawing room and you have 15 minutes. Not 14. Not 22. 15. A morning call lasted 15 minutes, and everyone in the room knew it, and no one looked at a clock because looking at a clock was rude. And yet when 15 minutes elapsed, the guest stood. The hostess did not stand. The hostess remained seated because standing would indicate that the visit had lasted longer than expected, which would imply the hostess had lost track of time, which would imply she had been so absorbed in the conversation that her domestic composure had slipped, which was not information she wanted in circulation. You stand at 14 minutes because you feel the conversation winding naturally toward an end. You have just made an error. 14 minutes means you wanted to leave. 14 minutes means the call was slightly less than it should have been. 14 minutes means something. No one will agree on what it means, but it means something. And that something will be discussed over lunch at a different house by women you have never met. Stand at 15 minutes and 30 seconds. 30 seconds of overrun communicates ease. Communicates that you were so comfortable, you allowed the time to drift fractionally. This is the correct signal. You understand what you are learning. Every second of every interaction was a unit of information. The Victorians did not invent small talk. They invented a parallel language conducted simultaneously with small talk, in which the real conversation was happening entirely in duration and posture, and the placement of gloves on a knee. By 1 o'clock, you are back in the house, and it is time for luncheon. Luncheon was the informal meal. Informal, in Victorian terms, meant that the footman served but the butler did not supervise, that the table setting used the second best china rather than the best, and that conversation was permitted to overlap slightly. Two people speaking at once for a duration of no more than 4 seconds before one deferred. If luncheon was informal, it had between 5 and 9 dishes across 2 courses. If luncheon was formal, you were at a dinner that had been scheduled for 1 o'clock and the distinction required explanation. You sit, the soup arrives, you pick up the wrong spoon. There were between 4 and 7 spoons at a fully set Victorian dinner table. The soup spoon was the largest. The bouillon spoon was smaller and rounder. The dessert spoon sat above the plate. The teaspoon lived on the saucer. There was sometimes a spoon whose function a modern person could not identify in under 60 seconds of examination, because its function was specific to a dish that no longer exists on any menu anywhere on Earth. You picked up the bouillon spoon for the soup. No one said anything. No one would ever say anything. This was the fundamental architecture of Victorian social cruelty. Nothing was ever said directly. Everything was recorded. The record was permanent and traveled faster than any correction you might attempt to make. Afternoon arrives, and with it the problem of what to do with your body in a society that had decided exactly what to do with your body and had written it down. Between 2 and 4, if the weather permitted, one drove or walked in the park. In London, this meant Hyde Park between 3 and 5, specifically the carriage drive known as Rotten Row, which had nothing to do with rot and derived from a French phrase meaning the royal road, which is what happens to words when languages collide over centuries. On Rotten Row, you drove slowly enough to be seen. You bowed from the carriage to people you knew. You bowed slightly less deeply to people of slightly higher rank. You bowed slightly more deeply to people of slightly lower rank. The angle of the bow was not written anywhere. It was absorbed over years of watching and being corrected by mothers and aunts and the accumulated pressure of 1,000 small observations. You bowed at the wrong angle to Lord Ashford. You bowed too deeply, which meant you placed him above you, which meant you had either correctly identified a social superior, in which case you had done well, or you had overestimated his rank, in which case you had revealed that you did not know exactly where everyone stood, which was the one thing you were absolutely required to know. Lord Ashford noticed. He will not mention it. The information goes into the system. By 5 o'clock, you are dressing for dinner, and the scale of the operation becomes visible. Dressing for dinner in a Victorian upper-class household took between 1 hour and 90 minutes. For a woman, this was not vanity, this was construction. The hair alone required 40 minutes, not because the hair was difficult, but because the arrangement communicated. An unmarried woman wore her hair differently from a married woman. A widow in first mourning wore her hair differently from a widow in half mourning. The jewels, and there were jewels because appearing at dinner without jewels was a statement of poverty or rebellion, neither of which was acceptable at someone else's table. The jewels were selected according to a logic that combined family pieces with current fashion with the specific status of the evening. Diamonds before 10, pearls for mourning, colored stones for a dinner of fewer than 16. No rules were written. All rules were known. You have appeared at dinner wearing your mother's emeralds. Your mother is still alive. Emeralds at this period and in this context carry an association with inheritance. With inheritance comes the implication of recent death. You are wearing a message you did not intend to send and cannot now unsend because you are already at the table and dinner is beginning. Dinner. Dinner in Victorian high society was the event for which everything else had been preparation. A formal dinner lasted between 3 and 4 hours. It had between 8 and 14 courses. Not 8 to 14 dishes, 8 to 14 courses, each of which might contain multiple elements. The kitchen had been working since morning. The cook had a staff of between 3 and 7, depending on the ambition of the household. The butler had synchronized the footmen to the minute. You sat according to precedence. Precedence was a ranked system so precise that the Lord Chamberlain's office published an official table of it. Dukes above marquesses, marquesses above earls, earls above viscounts, viscounts above barons, barons above baronets, baronets above knights, knights above esquires, esquires above gentlemen. And within each category, ancient titles above newer ones, British titles above Irish titles above Scottish titles in certain combinations, the whole hierarchy interlocking like a machine that had been running for 400 years and had opinions about every new component introduced to it. You went into dinner on the arm of the wrong person. Not catastrophically wrong, just wrong by one rank. The woman who should have entered on your arm entered on someone else's arm, and she noticed, and you will never know that she noticed, and the information is in the system. The meal begins. Turtle soup, then a fish course, sole or turbot or salmon depending on season. Then an entree, a small, elegant preparation, not the main event. Then the releve, which is the remove, which is the joint. A large roasted piece carved at table or brought already carved from the kitchen depending on the formality of the household. Then the sorbet, which is not dessert. The sorbet is a pause. The sorbet is the intermission in the middle of the meal, designed to reset the palate and allow the stomach to recalibrate before the second half begins. You have eaten the sorbet as though it were dessert. You have placed your spoon down with a finality that communicated completion. The footman has removed your sorbet glass and is now uncertain whether to present the next course because your posture suggests you believe the meal is over, when in fact you are approximately 45 minutes from the cheese. The hostess, from the far end of the table, has seen this. She adjusts without drawing attention. The footman receives a signal. The course continues. The evening continues. You continue, not knowing that you have just been managed by a woman exercising a skill so refined it was invisible. This is what Victorian high society actually was. Not the clothes, not the houses, not the 14-course dinners. It was a system of management. The hostess managed the table. The butler managed the staff. The lady managed the morning calls. The gentleman managed his card. The card managed the footman. The footman managed the threshold. The threshold managed who entered and who did not. Every layer managed the layer below it, and every layer was managed by the layer above, and the whole structure ran on a fuel that was not money. Money was necessary but not sufficient. The fuel was information. Correct information about rank. Correct information about protocol. Correct information about the 14 things you had done wrong today that no one would ever tell you about directly. By 10 o'clock, dinner has ended and the company has separated. The women withdraw. This is not euphemism. The women physically leave the dining room, led by the hostess, and proceed to the drawing room, where they drink tea and talk for between 20 and 40 minutes. The men remain at the table with the port and the cigars and conduct conversations that the women are not present to hear. Then the men join the women. Then there is music, or cards, or both. Then, at a signal from the hostess that is so subtle it might be a shift in posture or a particular pause in a sentence, the evening ends. The guests depart. The carriages are called. The house collapses back into its private architecture. You are in your bedroom at 10:30. The maid removes the evening clothes. She does not comment on the emeralds. She has noticed the emeralds. She mentioned the emeralds to the lady's maid of the hostess when they crossed paths in the servants' corridor at 7:15. The lady's maid mentioned it to the cook. The cook mentioned it to the butler. The butler said nothing, but filed it in the same internal ledger where he keeps everything, and the ledger is large and nothing in it has ever been lost. You have survived 24 hours. You have not survived unobserved. Every room you entered, every card you presented, every bow, every spoon, every minute you overstayed or understayed, every emerald you wore while your mother was still in Shropshire perfectly alive. All of it has moved through a system of observation and transmission that had no central authority and no enforcement mechanism and no written record, and was therefore impossible to appeal and impossible to escape. The Victorians did not police society. Society policed itself. Through 1,000 small observations made by people who would never say what they had seen, passed to people who would never admit they had been told, stored in a collective memory that had no location and no owner and no end. You understand what this means. Every system that has ever managed human behavior without appearing to manage it has been built on the same architecture. The rules no one writes down are the rules no one can argue with. The correction that never comes directly is the correction that never stops. You did not last 24 hours unscathed. No one did. That was never the point. The point was to keep trying, and to never let them see that you were trying, because trying was the one thing that could not be forgiven. The whole performance only worked if everyone pretended it required no effort at all, and they were very, very good at pretending.